What's up, everybody? Michael Walsh here. So the topic today is Paddy Pimblett and his very suspicious resume, because superficially, he sort of feels like an appropriate young, up-and-coming top contender. I think he's only 31, maybe even 30. He's 7-0 in the company, which typically in a vacuum, if all you knew about someone was that they were 7-0 in the UFC, more often than not, you'd be correct in assuming they were like the top contender. You'd be correct in assuming that their next fight would be for the title. I mean, even with company favoritism, like look at Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor was only 5-0 in the UFC before he initially got booked to fight Jose Aldo. And then that fight fell through because Aldo got hurt. He got replaced by Chad Mendes. Mendes and Conor fought for the interim belt. Conor beat Mendes, and then he was 6-0 before ultimately fighting Aldo and beating him. So, compared to that, making Paddy go 7-0, and really, if we're going to treat the Gaethje fight as more of a number one contender fight and not an actual title shot, because none of us take the interim title seriously, and just like with the Conor example, view his fight with Mendes as just him going 6-0, being a top contender, then fighting Aldo, Paddy would be 8-0 in the UFC with a win over Justin. And even with a dicey, questionable decision win over Jared Gordon, that's not the end of the world either. I mean, Khabib had a dicey, questionable decision win over Gleison Tebow, I think it was, and that didn't that didn't matter ultimately. But ordinarily, this kind of would just seem fine, and this would just seem like just sort of a normal up-and-coming contender and possible star. However, what's very weird about all this, and what many people pointed out, is that he's mostly just beating old guys with names. And the trajectory of this, to me, is just very plainly obvious, because most people, most analysts at least, weren't buying into the hype. They looked at Paddy on the regional scene, they looked at him in his initial few UFC fights, and they said, look, this guy isn't that good. His striking is sloppy, it's wild, it's largely thoughtless. His defense is absolutely terrible. His wrestling isn't good, and his jiu-jitsu, while good, is not lights out good. That was sort of the broad consensus. He was going to get fraud checked pretty quick was the idea. And many people, thought he lost to Jared Gordon, and many people were kind of shocked that that was seemingly his ceiling. And, it'd be fun to see that rematch. But, Paddy has gone on to improve. I think genuinely people have come around on him, at least to that degree. They've realized, okay, he's cleaned some things up. He actually does game plan well. He is actually a student of the game. He does actually follow the sport closely, follows his opponents closely. And that might seem like a low bar, but most fighters simply don't do that. So, I think he is improving. I think even his ace up his sleeve, or not his ace up his sleeve, but his ace skill set, jiu-jitsu, I think it has improved. I think it's improved in the UFC. I think we've watched it get better in his fights. So, Paddy, in his current form, I think is actually a genuine top something lightweight. Maybe that's only top 5, maybe it's not even that, but I think, he is a relevant lightweight. I think he is better than most lightweights in the UFC. I don't think he's better than the very best lightweights. I don't think he's better than Arman. I don't think he's better than Ilya. And, I'll have a prediction video coming out this week about whether I think he's better than Gaethje. But in any case, I think he's good. Now, what clearly happened, though, was that he fought Jared Gordon. He arguably lost to him. And then the UFC said, shit, we want to push this guy. We think this guy can be popular. We think this guy has hype. We need to find a way to promote him such that he keeps winning. They clearly, made that conscious choice. And what did they do? They gave him Tony Ferguson. And maybe if he would have just, nuked Tony, maybe if he would have just, beaten the shit out of Tony and subbed him in a round or something, maybe they would have changed course again and be like, okay, maybe the Jared Gordon win was, just a bad night or something. Let's give him someone more serious. Let's give him Benoit Saint Denis next or something. Maybe they would have gone that direction. But what happened was he beat Tony by decision. He struggled in the fight. Granted, some of this was because Tony was punching the body, which I like to see, when the fight was live. But like Paddy was kind of fatiguing as the fight went on, and it was like this very labored, kind of grueling performance where this younger guy wins, but it's very like, yeah. It's not perfectly analogous, and this other fight actually went to a finish, but like it kind of reminds me of like the rematch between Shogun Rua and Mark Coleman, where Shogun in many ways was past his best at this point because of his injuries, but like he was still the young guy. He was still in his 20s, and he was fighting old man Coleman, and it was this like sloppy, grueling affair that I think like Shogun got a TKO in the third round, but it was just kind of like a bad look all around. Shogun then went on to knock out Chuck Liddell in the first round, so that which earned him his title shot. So like Shogun went on to look good after that, but it was a bad look. It was a bad look coming into the UFC, losing to Forrest Griffin of all fucking people, and then having that kind of fight against Mark Coleman. And Paddy's fight with Tony Ferguson kind of gave me that vibe. And so I think the UFC said, well, shit, he like can't even wipe out Tony Ferguson. He can't even wipe out this old guy. Let's just do the same thing. Let's give him another old guy who has a name, who's like, maybe a little less washed than Tony, but is nevertheless a fucking old guy. So they gave him Bobby Green, another guy who'd beaten Tony Ferguson. So it was a step up. And there were a lot of people picking Bobby Green to win that fight. Like, I don't think anyone really picked Paddy to lose to Tony. I mean, Tony has some diehard fans, so maybe a few people. But like overall, the broad consensus in the community was that Paddy was going to beat Tony. But I did see a lot of people picking Bobby Green to beat Paddy because Bobby Green was coming off a win. He was like 3-1 or 4-1 in his last 4 or 5 fights. The idea was like, well, he'll keep it on the feet because he's not a bad grappler himself, and Paddy's wrestling sucks, and his hands are so sharp and Paddy is so hittable, he's going to light him up. People thought that, and Paddy came out with a very good game plan, looked more measured, and his jiu-jitsu, really turned up. And I did a whole video yesterday about what an impressive submission win that was to so quickly get Bobby Green in that triangle choke. So he does that, and they say, okay, well, that's a good look, but why risk a good thing here? Let's just keep going. So they give him Michael Chandler. And Chandler, again, is like a step up from Bobby Green. Chandler had just gone 5 rounds with Oliveira and nearly finished him in the 5th. And yeah, that's because he did cheat a lot, but he still did it. He still hurt him to get that going. And not all of those shots were to the back of the head, spoiler alert, people. But nevertheless, like Chandler past his best. Chandler was past his best when he came to the UFC. Like, as a longtime fan of Chandler, as a guy who was a big fan of his in Bellator, like, when he got booked to come to the UFC, like, I thought to myself, like, it's a shame he's coming in now. It's a shame he's coming in past his prime, because we watched him age out of his prime in Bellator, And, again, that was when he was making his goddamn debut against Dan Hooker, and this is and the fight with Paddy is this many years later, this many losses later. So, again, giving him an old guy who he can beat, giving him an old guy in this case who has, some limitations maybe even that like Ferguson and Green kind of didn't, to be blunt. Like, because Chandler was always better than people gave him credit for. He was always like a better grappler than people gave him credit for. And his striking wasn't always as stupid as it is now. But his skills have definitely atrophied as he's like aged out of his prime, and he's clearly made like a conscious choice to just be an action guy instead of a guy who like seriously pursues the title. And as a result of this, he has exploitable weaknesses. And Paddy came in with a good game plan, and I saw interviews leading up to that fight that impressed me on Paddy's part, where it was clear he had been himself personally studying Chandler and had a good sense of himself, like his own weaknesses, and a good sense of Chandler and how Chandler was going to try to exploit those weaknesses, and then how Paddy was going to take advantage of that. So, I was confident Paddy was going to win that fight, even though a lot of people, similar to the Bobby Green fight, a lot of people were picking Chandler to win. A lot of people were like, look, Chandler's old, but he's just too good. He's just better than Paddy Pimblett. Paddy Pimblett still kind of sucks. That was what a lot of people thought. Of course, Paddy, had some dicey moments. He had a big right hand. He got taken down and, held down longer than he should at points. But, like, on the whole, he kind of smashed Michael Chandler. And with that, a decent amount of people kind of came around on Paddy and said, okay, this guy's legit. This guy will beat most of the lightweights. A lot of people even then were saying, I'll pick him to beat Justin Gaethje. I'll pick him to beat Charles Oliveira. Like, I'll pick him to beat just about everyone who's not like Arman and Islam. And, that might be that might be a bridge too far. But, and again, I'm not going to spoil my prediction for this weekend, but it made sense that people started to appreciate Paddy at least. But it's hard to ignore the trend. It's hard to ignore the trend that his last 4 opponents, if we're including his upcoming opponent, Justin Gaethje, all 4 of those opponents were pushing 40 years old. Okay? And if he's able to beat Gaethje, he's already complaining that, like, people will just move the goalpost. If I beat Gaethje, they'll say he was too old. And it's like, yeah, we will. He is old, even if you beat him comfortably, that doesn't convince me you would have beaten the Justin Gaethje that fought Khabib. It simply doesn't. Because Gaethje is 37 and he had a whole wrestling career and he's got like 30 fights or something. He's taken a shitload of damage. Like, why this clearly isn't the best version of him. He's been knocked out several times. Like, I'm just not expecting, like if you can beat him, that doesn't tell me you're ready to take on Arman. That doesn't tell me you're ready to take on Ilya or Islam. So it might be, it might be seen as moving the goalpost, which it is in a sense. It's moving the goalpost in the way that we have for Jake Paul, because it's very much the same thing. Like, back when Paul made his debut, many of us picked Ben Askren to beat him because we're like, look, Ben Askren's boxing sucks. It's comically bad. But at least he's like done it. At least he's been training. At least he's been sparring. At least he's been in fights with actual strikers and had to dip, dive, and dodge punches from people, and punch back. At least he's just had to do that. Jake Paul is a fucking YouTuber. And then we saw what happened. And then we said, Tyron Woodley will beat him because Tyron Woodley can crack even though he's old and washed. He'll beat him. And then he didn't. And then it's like, oh, well, you would never beat Anderson Silva because Anderson Silva is one of the best MMA strikers ever. And he's actually a little bigger than Tyron. And he just beat whoever that famous boxer's son was, who himself is a boxer, I forget. But, he just beat that boxer in a boxing match. So you would, I remember like Luke Thomas basically saying like Jake Paul will never agree to fight Anderson Silva. Like he'll permanently duck him. And then he fights Anderson and beats him. He fights Nate Diaz and beats him. And it's like, and then Mike Tyson, like the Mike Tyson fight, many people were picking Mike Tyson to win because they just didn't realize how fucking old Tyson is and that they were only seeing short 5-second clips of him doing anything ever. And, so it's like for Jake Paul, we have also moved the goalpost. Like we have set, like he's long since beaten people that many of us never thought he could beat. But at the same time, the criticism is still there and it's not necessarily unfair that the goalpost is getting shifted because it's a case where, like, yes, by Jake Paul beating those people, he's revealing that he's maybe a better boxer than we gave him credit for. We're revealing that he's taking it seriously, that he's a mildly athletic dude who's, like, down to fight, and that he is just putting his time in. He is training. He's been training in the sport of boxing, like, full-time for years at this point, and he's just had several fights, so he's an okay, low-level pro boxer at this point. Kudos to him. But on the flip side, it's like, we didn't just learn, like, oh, you're better than we thought. We also learned, oh, these people are just worse than we thought. Like, oh, Tyron Woodley, A, just not that good at boxing, and B, just fucking washed and kind of small. Like Anderson Silva, just really fucking washed. Mike Tyson, really, really, really washed. Like that fight is less about, oh, see how good Jake Paul is, he beat Mike Tyson. It's more about, like, okay, see how being 60 will stop Mike Tyson from beating Jake Paul? Like, that's the takeaway message. And it's very similar with Paddy Pimblett, where it's like, yes, by beating Tony, by beating Green, by beating Chandler, and if you beat Gaethje, by beating him, you'll show us that you're better than we originally thought. That will be true. It's already true. Like, by beating, Green and Chandler especially, like, he showed us he's better than we originally thought. But it's also just showing us that those guys are fucking washed. It's also just showing us, like, I'm not convinced that the Chandler that beat Eddie Alvarez would have lost to you. I'm not convinced that the Justin Gaethje who fought Khabib would have lost to you. You know, the fact that they lost to you shows me how they're past their primes, you know? And I don't think that's unfair. So for Paddy to ever like really get out from under this, he just he just needs to fight an actual young top lightweight. He needs to fight Arman. He needs to fight Islam. He needs to fight Ilya. He like honestly, like even someone like Benoit Saint-Denis would be like a better win and a better look than someone like Justin Gaethje because of this dynamic. Because it'd be one thing if Gaethje was the only old guy he fought. It'd be one thing if like he put together 7 wins. You know, maybe he still had that dicey win over Gordon, but then he went on to beat other guys who were younger, like a Benoit Saint-Denis, and he just sort of put together this, you know, Charles Oliveira-esque run to the title or something. You know, it's like kind of good, a long win streak of like good and decent opponents. But if none of them were like ancient fossils, and it was just like, oh, okay, you're legit. You just beat a young like number 10 guy. You just beat a young number 12 guy, whatever. Like we would give him more credit. And then if he had to fight Justin Gaethje for a number 1 contender spot, we wouldn't hold it against him as much that Gaethje's old, because it'd be like, yeah, well, fair enough, you know. One old guy, and he is a top-ranked old guy. He is coming out, you know, he is coming off a win over Fiziev. Like, he doesn't suck. You know, he's not just like an old mummy compared to his former self or something. Like, we wouldn't be as mean about it. But since his only good wins are against old guys, are against old names, you know, to a degree that far surpasses, say, what Ilia Topuria has done. Because many people, myself included, have been critical of Ilya's last 3 wins and saying all three of those guys are past their primes, and I stand by that argument. But none of them, not even the oldest, not even Volk, is nearly as past his prime as fucking Tony Ferguson is, as fucking Bobby Green is, as fucking Michael Chandler is. You know, Volk was like 34, 35 or something like that when Ilya beat him. All these other guys, I think Justin's the youngest. I'm pretty sure the others were 38 and 39 when he beat them. And Gaethje is 37. That is pushing 40. Like, that is a big, you know, there is a decline, okay? You know, as a guy myself who's going to be turning 34 in a few weeks, I can tell you already, I see changes in my body where I can't train as hard, where, like, I get injured more quickly. Like, this shit happens, and I can only imagine that 5 years from now, it's gonna be worse. So, you know, I think Paddy is, yeah, it has feelings of, it's like a mix between Jake Paul and Conor McGregor. It's the favoritism, it's the fast tracking, it's the, like, just beating old guys and sort of proving you're better than we thought by beating those old guys, but conversely just proving they're worse than we hoped they were. You know, and leaving us wanting more. Like, just like most people wanted Jake Paul to fight someone his size in their prime who's actually good, you know, and he did the weird thing and fought Joshua and all that shit. But, like, just like we wanted that, like, we just want that from Paddy. We want Paddy to fight Arman. So, until that happens, he's never going to get full credit. Even though, with an 8-fight win streak, even if there's a lot of old guys there, like, he still kind of deserves a title shot. Like, he... not more than Arman does, and I did a whole video about this in the past, but like those 8 wins in a row, and including ranked guys, like Chandler was ranked when he beat him. I don't think he was top 10. I think he was like 12 or 11 or something. But if he beats him and he beats and he beats Justin, who's top 5, and he's got like an 8-fight win streak, like that's typically enough, you know? So, like, him versus Arman would not be, like, a silly fight. It wouldn't be, like, this lopsided, like, unfair booking or something where it's like, how did the sanctioning bodies even allow this? It's not that kind of fight. It's an appropriate fight. But Arman should be the big favorite in that, just based on what we know about Gaethje, based upon what we've seen about him and his athleticism and his skills. So... like, it just, the whole thing is weird. Like, the whole thing, like, another fighter who I think is a good analog is Sean O'Malley, where it's like, they just line dudes up for him, they'd be easy to beat, and then he had, like, this iffy fight with Pedro Munoz that becomes a no contest, and they're like, okay, well, let's let's sort of leapfrog you and give you a shot against Peter Yan, who I think they pegged as being like an easier stylistic matchup than most of us thought he was at the time. And they're like, okay, well, if we can just get you this one win over that guy, then boom, we'll give you a title shot. And this is different because like a win over Yan is just much more meaningful than a win over like current Justin as far as earning a title shot in the respective divisions. But, Paddy's the favoritism he's received and the matchmaking he's received has just not done enough to prove to us that he's the guy. And, and that's with it being said that like ordinarily this wouldn't seem that weird, and ordinarily this would earn you a title shot. Ordinarily this collection of wins, if someone like Arman Tsarukyan wasn't in the division, this collection of wins, even over the old guys, would be enough to make you the top contender. I mean, Islam Makhachev barely beat anybody, and he had a 10-fight win streak, not an 8-fight win streak, but like he didn't beat any top contenders either, and everyone knew he deserved his fucking title shot. So it's like, it's a strange, like, it's just a very strange, murky thing where you can't totally dismiss Paddy. You can't totally dismiss what he's done. You can't just totally call this favoritism in the way that should Conor McGregor get a fucking title shot, that would just be favoritism. That would just be, you're a star, you make money. There's no meritocratic considerations here at all. Paddy has kind of earned this spot in a way, but in such a way that you have no faith in him, that you have no confidence in him, that you're still wondering how good he actually is and how much this is fool's gold. So that's the suspicious resume of Paddy Pimblett.